Hello Horror Hounds, I wanted to kick off the week with another horror talking point, and this time I'm getting Freudian on your ass. I want to talk about mothers in horror, such a rich topic that by necessity this video is going to be like a skipping stone, just skimming across the surface of the subject. In that vein, I've put together a very superficial list of the mothers in horror that spring immediately to mind, the good, the bad, the areas of grey. So please, the idea is if you want to join in, there will be tons of examples that I've missed. Join the conversation down below in the comments section, and let's get this mother started. It's amazing when you start thinking about mothers in horror, how many different examples there were. I had to actually stop my list, otherwise this video would become ridiculously long. And it kind of makes sense. For a start, it's a relationship that everyone can understand. Everyone has a mother, and we all have different types of mothers. Present, absent, good, bad, trying their best. It's such a rich seam to mine, and also I only half jokingly mentioned Freud at the top of the video. That sort of relationship, or different types of relationship, can act as such a naughty little metaphor, and horror is always at its best, I feel, when it's using its lens to dissect some other metaphor, when the horror is an essay on something else perhaps, although there's always a place for good old honest splatter. But if you tell me that the best splatter films aren't also about something else, I'll tell you haven't been watching the right splatter movies. If we kick off with the good mothers, and this is the shortest one on my list, there are probably loads more examples, so please join in down below. But the first one that instantly springs to mind is Chris MacNeil, played by Ellen Burstyn, the mum in The Exorcist. Absolutely sure. When you first watch The Exorcist, when you're younger, you're watching it for all the demon stuff, all the possession stuff. As you get older, your relationship with that film changes. This is why it's a masterpiece. There are so many levels and access points you can engage on The Exorcist with, and one of them is this story of a mother struggling to help her daughter in circumstances that no one really understands. Ellen Burstyn's performance as this sort of, at the start, it could be argued that with her career perhaps, and this is a touching point we'll come back to again and again, women with careers who are perhaps punished with a small p for not being the stereotypical mother figure. There's hints there that she's perhaps a little more absent. Her father is Reagan's father is definitely absent from the scene, but she takes on this mama bear role, sort of, for want of a better phrase, and she will do absolutely whatever it takes to protect and help her daughter, to the extremes where she's willing to consider demonic possession and seek out the help of an exorcist when all medicine and science fails. Another fierce mama bear character that sprung instantly to mind was Donna Trenton, the mum in Cujo, played in the movie superbly by Dee Wallace. Another powerhouse performance about a mum in extreme circumstances trying to save her child. At least the son survives in the movie. There's such a mean streak running through Stephen King's book, where it does seem, although you'll have to forgive me, it's been a long time since I've read it, it does seem that there's some sort of universal punishment being meted out to her through her son for having an affair. Again, it's been a really long time, so if you're more closely familiar with the story of Cujo, is that a fair representation? Is Donna the mum being somehow weirdly punished for her transgressions outside the boundaries of the role of mother and wife, or am I maybe reading a little bit too much into this? And if you've got the good, of course you've got the bad, and horror films are full of bad mums. The queen of all of them, the empress of the bad mums, surely has to be Pamela Voorhees from Friday the 13th. Although interestingly, we're never really told what she was like as a mother. We get her telling of the death of her son, and who she blames. But by this point, she's completely insane. But she's so fixed on this idea of revenge for her son that when she pops up at the end, Pamela really, let's be honest, although Jason took over the mantle, became the figurehead, the icon of the Friday the 13th series, every Mother's Day I still see the pictures of Jason hugging his mum and the like. Jason is always still a mama's boy. It's weird how that revenge trope got flipped, and it was Pamela avenging the death of her son, and then when we bring Jason back into the mix, we're all quite comfortable with the notion, even though it's not really explicitly stated, that now Jason is going on a killing spree because his mum was beheaded at the end of that film. The little hints we get in part 2 of him, I guess, keeping his mother's head and jumper are a little signpost towards that. But as viewers, we're filling in an awful lot of the story about Jason and his mum and what kind of relationship they had. Even more elusive, but yet nonetheless still driving the narrative forwards in no uncertain terms, is Norma Bates, spoilers for Psycho, dead many, many years before the start of the movie, yet it's Norma's pervasive, insidious influence that sets in motion everything that goes on in that movie. And yet, let's be honest, we know absolutely nothing about Norma Bates. Yeah, sure, we hear her speak, but it's through Norman's mouth. That characterization of mother is in Norman's head. Think about it. We don't even know if that's accurate or not. We don't even know if that's what she was like at all. And yet, in absentia, Norma Bates is this strong, oppressive, matriarchal figure that is the engine behind all of the horror that unfolds in the movie. Norma finds a modern day sister, cousin in Ellen Lee, the dead matriarch at the start of Hereditary. An absolute fantastic film, but another film about a dead mother whose influence drives, in very different ways, the narrative of that film. Hereditary gets to have its cake and eat it because it has two mothers, one dead and one alive. Toni Collette giving an absolutely operatic powerhouse performance as Annie Graham, who is, depending on how you want to read the movie, a victim and also an antagonist. She occupies a very strange sort of liminal space. There's an untold story that we get clues about where, if we'd seen the previous generation, she'd absolutely be the victim, but now she herself is the domineering, perhaps insane matriarch herself, who is setting an awful lot of wheels into motion. Or is she just a powerless pawn and those wheels got set into motion a generation before? That's one of the messages of Hereditary. That's why the film is called that. Some of these poisons get passed on generation to generation, and if you want a film that really delves into some of the nitty-gritty, some of that little knotty psychological stuff I was talking about at the top of the video, about why the relationships, familial relationships, and especially mothers and their offspring, such a juicy little nugget to bite into, you can do no worse than Hereditary. In David Cronenberg's The Brood, we have again another absentee mother figure, Nola Carveth. This time there's a custody dispute, but the film follows the father, and she is talked about. We don't really get to see her, except for a couple of scenes, and not really substantially until the very end of the movie. Yet it is her who, again, making her little rage babies, who is driving the narrative, and everything builds up to her and her glorious revelation of her sort of transformed body, making emotions physical in the wonderful body horror way that David Cronenberg absolutely excels at. And the infamous moment where she takes one of those little newborn babies out of its sack and licks the blood off of its forehead absolutely hammering, in no uncertain terms, nailing it to the floor, that for all our highfalutin philosophies, this cycle of reproduction, whilst we think we're fancy pants humans with our shoes and digital watches, is nothing more than animal impulses. And if you want to dig down into some of these characters, you will find that the animal comes out. I'm thinking back now again of Dee Wallace facing off against Cujo, stripped away to the point of desperation, where the little line of steel that runs through you at the centre is that of an animal. We can't talk about dominating and domineering matriarchs without mentioning Margaret White and the formidable, played by the formidable Piper Laurie. Just as operatic, I would suggest, as Toni Collette's matriarch in Hereditary. These shrill, histrionic, wild and wide-eyed mothers of horror cinema. What is it about that? What is it? You've got the mums who sort of exist in the shades of grey in between, not completely good, not completely bad. You know, human. I'm thinking of Ringu, the original, not necessarily the American remake, which takes an awful lot of its cues from Ringo. In Koji Suzuki's novel of Ring, the protagonist is not the mum, it's the father, Kazuyuki Asakawa. Of course I had to read that. Director Hideo Nakata and screenwriter Hiroshi Takahashi essentially gender flipped the thing. I know gender flipping gets a bad rep. When it's done for a reason, it works like gangbusters, and the change that Nakata made to The Ring really makes the film pop. It gives it so many new layers of meaning and nuance. So now our protagonist is the mum, Reiko Asakawa, played by Nanako Matsushima. Thank you very much. I've earned my wages for this week. Reiko is professional, she's driven, she's determined, she's a single mother, but she's also shown to be all of those things at the expense of her maternal side. Maybe a little bit like Chris McNeil in The Exorcist. So she's certainly, I don't want to say necessarily abandoning her son, but there are elements of abandonment there, definitely, and it really plays into the ends. So while Sadako may be in part, although Sadako's journey and motivations are themselves a little Gordian knot of entanglement, but while in part Sadako may be seeking a mother, if you follow Koji Suzuki's novels in a loop, you'll actually find out that yes, well, perhaps literally physically a mother is what she's looking for to be reborn, while Sadako is looking for a mother. We find that the only woman with the sort of gumption and determination to get to the bottom of the curse is a mother who all but abandons her own son on a regular basis. Is there the suggestion, again, a little bit like Curiosity Killed the Cat, is Reiko's professional drive that draws her into this cursed thing, her universal karmic punishment for being a bad mother? I'm mindful of the character of Amelia in The Babadook, played again superbly by Essie Davis. And as with Hereditary, depending on how you choose to read the film, she's either the hero or the villain, or both at the same time. A very difficult relationship on show there between mother and son in very strained and extreme circumstances. One where I can feel desperate empathy for both sides of the coin. I think The Babadook is most certainly working at its best on the level of metaphor again in that movie. A little lighter, a little bit more poppy. You've got the Scream movies. at the heart of which is, again, a years dead, long dead mother, or is it just a couple of years? Or 1 year, is it the anniversary? Oh God, I need to rewatch Scream. But Maureen Prescott, Sydney's mum, dead, and yet it turns out that the woman she was, or the things she did, or the woman she was perceived to be by the wider community are the reasons that certainly the first three movies even freaking happen. And I want to end by talking about Shelley Duvall and her turn as Wendy Torrance in The Shining. That performance, to this day, still gets a lot of opprobrium, a lot of stick. It's a performance that was manipulated, I think it's fair to say, by the director. Stanley Kubrick treated her horrifically. But as a character, and even by Stephen King himself, and I get that he's a little bit more precious, this is not the Wendy Torrance that he created. He considers Shelley Duvall's character to be an entirely misogynistic creation, just designed to cry and scream and run away, who has no agency. There's certainly an argument to be made for that. I would counter that with the suggestion that if you strip out, let me put it this way, the Wendy Torrance in the movie of The Shining is a woman who is completely cowed, completely bent to the will of her husband. We know from both versions, the book and the Kubrick movie, that they've had problems in the past. Jack's been violent in the past. He drank in the past. He hurt Danny, had to go to the hospital. This is an abusive relationship, and it's been an abusive relationship for an awfully long time. Wendy Torrance in the film is a character who, as I mentioned, is completely cowed to the will of her husband. It's another film where when you're younger you watch it for the ghosts and the spooks and the haunted hotel aspect of it, but the older you get, if you strip out all of the ghosts and all of the psychic phenomenon, you have a woman who is essentially an emotional prisoner of her husband, and has been for years. The smiles that play across her face are always nervous smiles. Before they get to the hotel, she's always afraid of saying the wrong thing. She's always wondering which Jack is going to respond, the affable open Jack or the angry Jack. Rather than this being an awful performance, a drag on the movie, a crappy character and crappy characterization, I would actually counter that with the assertion that if you take out all the bells and whistles, Wendy Torrance's experience in this movie, her life in this movie, is being experienced right now exactly the same by women all over the world. Right now, exactly the same. And if that's not scary, I don't know what is.